As a traveler without a golden finger, when he found the breathing notes left by his ancestors, Fukuoka Ming was already a bit panicked. However, he didn't panic anymore when he thought that it was already 2022 and there could be no more evil spirits, until he heard that SAO was sealed for testing. Isn't that right? Why are breathing techniques and sword god domains in the same world? Single female lead, general manager, tentative storyline is sword god domain. Fairy dance. Ghost Annihilation. Chapter 1. Hey. Is the sealing test of the sword god domain over? You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's better to stack the armor. It's inevitable for newcomers to have toxic points when writing a book for the first time. Many parts of the previous plot were copied from the advanced section. Feel free to comment and point out any mistakes. As soon as you see them, you can correct them. Lose your mind. Thank you. The slightly hazy morning sunlight passed through the window, shining on the face of the boy still lying in bed. The boy's eyes gradually opened and he listened to the sound of the alarm clock on his phone. He yawned and raised his hand to turn off the alarm clock. Ah, a rare weekend. The boy rubbed his hazy eyes. Mingxi. Hurry up and get ready to eat. A gentle female voice came from outside the door. Didn't you say you were going to practice swordsmanship with Grandpa Tongu early today? Got it, coming soon. The young man quickly put on his clothes and got off the bed, thinking to himself, how could he have gone to practice swordsmanship when his mind was hot? It's basically useless in this daily world of swordsmanship. As a traveler, Akira Fukuoka has been a child of other families since childhood. He is intelligent, mature, and not only ranks first in his studies, but also among the top in sports. Fukuoka Akira turned on the faucet in the restroom and splashed a few drops of water on his face. The slightly icy water hit his face, taking away the confusion he had just woken up. He looked up in the mirror, which revealed a youthful and handsome face. In his eyes were a pair of slightly lifeless eyes, with slightly upward corners and slightly thinner lips, making it look a bit difficult to touch at first glance. Dipping the comb in a little water, I tidied up my black hair and found it a bit messy after sleeping. I gathered my slightly moist hair with water droplets together, tied it with a hair rope, and walked out of the bathroom. Sandra Slippers went downstairs and walked slowly to the table. At this time, a gentle woman came out of the kitchen with a plate and fried dough twists braids in front of her, making people want to say a word, madam. Alright, hurry up. Miyako Fukuoka placed the plate on the table and said, don't let Grandpa Tongu wait too long. She handed the glass filled with milk to Akira Fukuoka. I know, I'm not a child anymore, I've graduated from junior high school. Akira Fukuoka took out a rice and vegetable roll from his plate and put it into his mouth, mumbling, taking milk and drinking. By the way, I have already packed your swordsmanship suit in a bag. The bag is at the entrance, and the bento is also there, said Miyako Fukuoka, watching as Akira Fukuoka ate all the food on his plate and took it to the kitchen. Okay, I see it. Fukuoka Mingxi took the shoes out of the shoe cabinet, put them on, and reached out to lift the bag containing the swordsmanship suit from the entrance cabinet. He opened the door with another bag containing a bento. Remember to buy groceries when you come back. Miyako Fukuoka's head poked out of the kitchen door and said loudly, while also making a gesture of goodwill towards Akira Fukuoka. Fukuoka Mingxi looked at his cute mother and said helplessly, don't maliciously act cute. It's really embarrassing for an old woman to do such cute actions. Wow, is Mingxi starting to despise his mother for being old? Mingming used to laugh and say things like I love my mother the most. Woo woo woo, Tomoko said with a tearful expression. Fukuoka Mingxi raised his hand and pressed his forehead, saying with a headache, alright, when I come back, I'll bring you a strawberry feast. Don't pretend to cry like a child anymore. Upon hearing this, Miyako Fukuoka immediately stopped pretending and made a puff of air to Akira Fukuoka, saying, thank you to Akira. By the way, besides strawberry daifu, why don't you buy 2 matcha cakes? After all, Dad really likes this one. Fukuoka Ming suddenly felt a bit unnecessary inside, saying, I know, I will buy it. He turned his head and closed the door, walking towards the road. When passing by the dim sum shop, Fukuoka Ming went in and bought some grass cake, and then went to KFC to buy a roast chicken and hamburger. Grandpa Tongu seems to like eating grass cake, he said to himself. Fukuoka Akira walked into the tram station carrying a bag and bought a ticket to Kawaga City, Saitama Prefecture. After getting off the tram, Fukuoka Akira was familiar with walking towards Grandpa Tongu's Kendo hall, and it took about 10 minutes to arrive. Looking at the old man smoking a cigarette in front of the Kendo gym, Fukuoka Ming said, Grandpa Tongu, I'm here, isn't it too late? After hearing this, the old man looked at Fukuoka Ming and said with a smile, you came just right, cough. Fukuoka Ming saw the old man coughing again and helplessly said, everyone said you smoke less, it's not good for your health. He handed the box with the silver cake in his hand to the old man. Oh, I bought the silver cake for you. The old man laughed heartily and threw his cigarette butt into the nearby trash can. He took the silver cake and said, thank you, Ming Si. He took out a silver cake and took a bite, then said, anyway, my old bone doesn't have many years to live well. Can't you please enjoy it? At this moment, a crisp female voice came from the Kendo hall. Ming-si-go is right, Grandpa. What's good about smoking? It's choking and not good for the body. The owner of the voice walked out of the door, a young girl wearing a white Kendo uniform, holding a bamboo knife in one hand, and a face shield in the other. She had short black shoulder-length hair and dark green eyes, looking very youthful and beautiful. Oh, Naoya, smoking is one of my grandfather's few hobbies. Grandpa Tongu scratched the back of his head and said, besides, I've only smoked less than a pack of cigarettes in the past 2 days. Grandpa, what does it mean to only draw less than 1 pack? Is 1 pack still missing? Naoya said angrily. The old man waved his hand and said with a perfunctory smile, all right, I won't smoke anymore, I won't smoke anymore. Naoya was a bit dissatisfied. Just as he was about to say something more, the old man quickly pulled Fukuoka Ming over and said, all right, hurry up and train with Ming. If we continue to procrastinate, we'll have lunch. Naoya glared at the old man, his mouth bulging like a pufferfish, swallowed his words, and turned around to enter the Kendo gymnasium. The old man scratched the back of his head again and smiled at Ming, saying, let's go, let me see if you have made any progress. Fukuoka Ming followed the old man into the Kendo gym and said to Naoya not far away, Ming, go change your clothes quickly. I will definitely defeat you this time. Upon hearing this, Fukuoka Ming smiled and said, all right, let me see the strength of the top 8 female experts in the National Junior High School group. Upon hearing Fukuoka Ming slightly teasing words, the girl blushed slightly and said in a slightly urgent voice, just wait for me to defeat you hard. Fukuoka Ming smiled and took out his swordsmanship suit, walking towards the changing room. In the changing room, Akira Fukuoka took off his black hoodie. As he took it off, he pulled up his inner shirt, revealing his lower abdomen. The obvious abdominal muscles on his lower abdomen made him feel very powerful. Fukuoka Ming changed into a black Kendo uniform with a faint laundry detergent smell, put on his body armor, checked it for accuracy, and then walked out of the changing room with his face armor. Fukuoka Akira held a bamboo knife and looked at Naoya, who was doing a Suzuki in the center of the venue. He smiled and said, come on. Upon hearing this, Naoya took a few steps back and put on the side armor. Fukuoka Akira walked up to Naoya and also put on the armor. Grandpa Tongu stood by the sidelines and asked, are you all ready? The two of them made a gesture and nodded. So, 3 eyes determine the winner, let's start. As Grandpa Tongu's words fell, Naoya quickly rushed towards Fukuoka Ming, waving his bamboo knife towards him. Fukuoka Akira couldn't avoid it, lifted his knife to block Naohi's attack, turned his wrist lightly, and unloaded the force from the bamboo knife to the side. He then flipped the blade and swung towards Naohi. Naoka immediately retreated upon seeing the situation, and Fukuoka Ming stepped forward to follow. The bamboo sword in his hand feigned towards Naoka's right side, and Naoka blocked the direction of his feigned attack. However, Fukuoka Ming suddenly turned his sword and hit Naoka's face armor from the left. "Noodle, one glance," Fukuoka Ming whispered. With a successful strike, Fukuoka Ming immediately retreated. "Come again," Naoya said defiantly, and after that, he attacked Fukuoka Ming again. Naoya lifted the bamboo knife high and forcefully swung it towards Fukuoka Ming. The bamboo knife made a sound of air tearing in the air. Fukuoka Ming quickly dodged to the side, avoiding the bamboo knife that was swung. Jie saw the situation and changed the knife to a horizontal split, quickly splitting towards Fukuoka Ming. Fukuoka Ming lifted the knife grid to block it, and there was a snap sound at the junction of the blade. Fukuoka Ming felt the force emanating from the bamboo knife and murmured inwardly, "Hey, is it necessary to exert such force, Naoka?" As he spoke, he blocked Naoka's bamboo knife and swung it diagonally towards Naoka. Naoya let out a soft hum, retreated to avoid Fukuoka Ming-si's attack, and then raised his hand to stab Fukuoka Ming-si in the abdomen with a bamboo knife. The tip of the knife collided with his body armor, making a bang sound. Jiye's mouth slightly curled up and said, "Abdomen, one eye." Fukuoka Ming-si stepped back and touched his slightly painful abdomen, then took a cold breath and his eyes gradually became serious. After several rounds of confrontation with Naoya, he retreated a few meters. Fukuoka Ming-si raised his bamboo sword horizontally to the height of his head, silently reciting in his heart, the 7 types of water breathing, the ripples and spikes. He quickly headed towards the straight leaf thorns. Only the sword type, without using breathing techniques. The extremely fast stab made Naoya a bit unresponsive. As he was about to hit, Fukuoka Akira had already regained some strength. The bamboo sword hit Naoya's right hand armor, and at the same time, Fukuoka Akira said, "Hand, 2 eyes." Looking at Fukuoka Ming-si retreating, Naoya pursed his lips and remained silent, then raised his sword again and attacked Fukuoka Ming-si. After a few rounds, the final match ended with the words of Fukuoka Akira, "Face, 3 eyes." Naoya took off her armor and revealed a slightly unhappy little face. Fukuoka Minami saw this and said helplessly, "All right, don't be unhappy. What do you think this is?" He handed Naoya the KFC packaging box placed by the sidelines. Opening the packaging, Naoya smelled the aroma of roasted chicken and hamburgers. She smiled and looked at Fukuoka Ming-si, who was smiling beside her. She snorted again and turned her head to say in a low voice, "Thank you, Ming-si brother." "It's really like a child," Fukuoka Ming-si said with a smile. Naoya blushed and ignored him. Fukuoka Akira shook his head, picked up the bento that had just been heated in the microwave, and ate the pork chop rice in the bento box. Just as Fukuoka Akira stuffed a piece of pork chops into his mouth, the phone next to him shook. Fukuoka Akira picked up the phone with the pork chops in his mouth and his gaze was drawn to a news push. The SAO beta test has been completed today, and the public beta is expected to start in early November. Fukuoka Ming-si was stunned, and the pork chops in his mouth fell back into the lunchbox, with a bewildered expression on his face. "Well, that's not right, right?" Fukuoka Ming-si was feeling unwell all over. Isn't this the world after the blade of the demon slayer? Why is there a SAO? At this moment, Naoya walked over and asked, "What's wrong, brother Ming-si?" Naoya glanced at Fukuoka Ming-si's phone and said, "Hey. SAO. It's quite famous these past 2 months, and many people in my school are talking about it. Is it very famous? Why haven't I heard of it all along?" Upon hearing Fukuoka Akira's question, Naoya replied, it seems that there hasn't been much promotion in the past 2 months, only game enthusiasts know about it. Naoya paused for a moment and said, I also learned about it from my brother. Fukuoka Akira fell silent upon hearing this. A few hours later, after finishing his training, Akira Fukuoka bid farewell to Grandpa Naoka and Toshiya. He quickly ran to the tram station and bought a ticket back to the Setagaya district as quickly as possible. After getting off the train, he bought desserts and headed straight home. After returning home, he placed his things on the dining table, stomped upstairs, entered the room, opened the computer, searched for SAO, and looked at the results on the screen. Fukuoka Ming leaned back in his chair with his eyes lost in thought. The light from the computer screen mixed with the sunset and scattered on the boy's face. The boy said helplessly, "Ah, the sword god domain is sealed for testing." Chapter 2. Kendo and Breathing of Water. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 16 years ago, Akira Fukuoka was just an ordinary office worker, living every day like copying and pasting the previous day. Until his 28th birthday, he looked at the small cake he had bought and made a wish. Hoping that his life would not be as calm and boring as it is now. And at that moment, a voice came to his ear. Okay, it's easy to do. So, are you ready to embrace a new life? Before Fukuoka Ming could react, he suddenly lost consciousness. When he opened his eyes again, Fukuoka Ming had already turned into a little baby. At first, Fukuoka Akira struggled to accept it, but over time, his mother, Miyako Fukuoka, and father, Kazuo Fukuoka, also made Fukuoka Akira, who was originally a single-parent family and was raised by his grandparents from a young age, feel a true sense of home. He gradually accepted the idea of being reincarnated into another world. Having accepted these, Fukuoka Akira originally intended to feel the beauty of life as an ordinary person and align his life goals with those of Lumuru. But during the summer vacation of his first year in junior high school in Fukuoka, when he found a notebook called Water Breathing Practice Notes in the ancestral hall of his grandparents' house in the countryside, his entire brain was completely paralyzed. Even though it was supposed to be the everyday world, suddenly a breathing technique came out. Akira Fukuoka thought to himself. As a Season 2 spined salamander, Akira Fukuoka naturally knows what the breath of water is. He even suffered from the second disease at the age of 27 before. He bought a 1.2.1 wooden sunwheel sword and recorded all the sword shapes of his breathing techniques. After changing his costume, he directly carried the sunwheel sword to the manga exhibition. Originally, Akira Fukuoka was a bit flustered when he looked at this notebook, but on second thought, it was already 2019 and it was almost the 100th anniversary of his tragic death. Therefore, Akira Fukuoka was no longer flustered. Fukuoka Ming actually didn't intend to practice water breathing, but no one could refuse to cut out a faucet with a knife. Doge, looking at the absurd training methods on the notebook, such as moving quickly in the mountains and forests full of traps, wave your sword under the waterfall and feel the flow of water. Fukuoka Akira gave up the idea of fully training according to his notes and gave himself 2 big ear scrapes, saying, "It's because I exceeded my abilities." Fukuoka Ming enthusiastically approached his grandfather and begged him to make a bamboo knife for him, practicing a reduced version of the water breath training. Grandpa looked at Fukuoka Ming waving his sword and smiled, saying, "Ming, are you interested in swordsmanship?" Fukuoka Ming nodded and touched his chin before saying, "It seems that our family used to have skilled swordsmen. I remember my grandfather Fukuoka Iyong was a very skilled swordsman." Although there have been speculations, Akira Fukuoka was still somewhat surprised that his ancestor was Fukuoka Yoshiyuki. The next morning, Grandpa took Fukuoka Ming on the tram to Kawaga City, Chiyu Prefecture and smiled, saying to Fukuoka Ming, "Since Ming is interested in Kendo, let's go practice it." Grandpa said on the way to the Kendo hall with Fukuoka Ming, "Now I will take you to a Kendo hall opened by an old friend of mine. His hall usually does not recruit students from outside." "Hey! Don't we recruit students from outside, why?" Grandpa replied, he likes quietness on weekdays and doesn't like the sound of dozens of people holding bamboo knives colliding with each other. Moreover, his family is not short of money, so he doesn't recruit students from outside. So, is he powerful? Fukuoka Ming asked again. Although that guy doesn't accept students, his level is beyond doubt. As early as a few years ago, he was already an 8-dan model scholar who obtained the qualification of a teacher. Grandpa smiled and said. Is that so? Akira Fukuoka nodded and said. I quickly arrived at the Kendo gymnasium, which was not very large. Inside, there were only 2 knife holders with tai dao, a knife barrel with several bamboo knives, and a table with a shrine. After taking off his shoes and entering the dojo, Grandpa shouted in unison, Tongu Pinji. Where are you, an old kid? Where did you die? Fukuoka Ming, who was just a bit distracted, heard his grandfather's words and was immediately dumbfounded. Fukuoka Ming instantly turned into a bean-eyed person. Fugang, you old *dang still has such a bad mouth. A slightly irritable voice came from the other side of the dojo, interrupting Fukuoka Ming from his daze. Fukuoka Ming looked in the direction of the sound, and there stood an old man holding a bamboo knife. The old man appeared to be in his 60s, with black hair mixed with a few strands of silver white. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and his thick black eyebrows complemented the old man's serious gaze, making him feel very strict. Although there are a few age spots on the face, the person does not show any signs of aging. After strode over with a bamboo knife in his hand, Hirano Toshiwagi threw it to Shizo Fukuoka. He took out another bamboo knife from the nearby knife barrel and said, Come on, Lao *dang, see if you have regressed in the past few years. Fukuoka Jizang took the bamboo knife and chuckled. He saw that Hirano Tamiyama had already put on a posture, touched Fukuoka Ming's head, and said, Mingsi, you go next to me. I'll fight this old boy a few moves first. After that, he pushed Fukuoka Ming out of the field, raised the bamboo knife, and also put on a posture. The 2 elderly people faced off for a while charging towards each other. 2 bamboo knives collided in the air, and after a moment, they immediately separated. Accompanied by the competition of the elderly, the sound of bamboo knives hitting each other spread throughout the hall. Fukuoka Ming stared blankly at the 2 elderly men who were constantly wielding knives. You should know that apart from the 9-dan and 10-dan, which were mostly awarded to the deceased, the 8-dan samurai could already be said to be the top swordsman in all Neon. As an 8th-dan samurai, Toyotomi Hirano's strength is naturally extremely strong, but what Tomioka Ming didn't expect was that he always smiled, like an old and unscrupulous grandfather who was also so strong, able to fight against the 8th-dan samurai back and forth without falling behind. After a few more rounds, Fukuoka Jizang put down his sword and waved his hand, saying, Stop fighting. I'm getting old and I don't have the strength anymore. Humph, that's it. Tongu Hirano snorted coldly. Fukuoka Shizo rolled his eyes and said, Yes, that's it. It's not like you, an old kid, who is still as strong as a cow at the age of 60 or 70. Tongu Hirano snorted again, took a short breath, and asked, Tell me, what's up with coming to me? Fukuoka Jizang pointed his finger towards Fukuoka Ming and said with a slightly proud tone, This is my grandson, Fukuoka Ming. Hirano Tamiyama nodded and asked again, and then what? This kid is interested in swordsmanship. How about you teach him? After looking at Fukuoka Jizang and then turning his head to look at Fukuoka Ming, Tomiya Hirano pondered for a moment and said, Okay. You don't have to be soft on this kid. You can do whatever you want. If he can persist, you can teach him. If he can't persist, you don't have to worry, said Fugang Jizang. So, Fukuoka Ming, who had no presence nearby, was handed over by the 2 elderly people word by word. After 2.5 years of practice, Fukuoka Akira, who had just graduated from junior high school, used his breath of water for the first time. Looking at the faint water color appearing on the bamboo knife, Fukuoka Akira seemed to have reached G.point. Haha. Haha. With a burst of enthusiasm and a breath of water, Fukuoka Ming swung 2 knives and felt the lungs in his chest as if they were about to explode. He fell to the ground on the spot, feeling as if he had seen his deceased grandmother waving at him from the sky. The unsettled situation that Fukuoka Ming originally felt has come to an end, and he can continue to calm down as an ordinary person who can breathe a little bit of water. But he had just calmed down for 2 months, and just entering high school, Akira Fukuoka learned about the completion of the Sword God domain sealing test in late September, less than a month after the start of school. Fukuoka Ming, who only wants a peaceful life, cannot rise again. Chapter 3. NER vGear Equipment. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Fukuoka Ming, who was slumped in a chair, remained silent for a long time, looking at the computer screen without knowing what was on his mind. At this moment, the voice of Miko Fukuoka came from downstairs. Ming, where are the dishes you bought? Fukuoka Ming's face froze as he awkwardly said, I'm sorry Mom, I forgot. Miko Fukuoka, who had just come up from downstairs to open the door of Ming's house, looked at his face and muttered, There's no way, let Dad buy groceries when he comes back, said Miyako Fukuoka, taking out her phone and sending a message to Fukuoka. Looking up and seeing the web page on Fugang Ming's computer, Fugang Miko smiled and said, Hey. Is Mingxi interested in this game? Our company seems to have invested in the development team Argus. If you want to play, let Dad bring you one when the time comes. Good. Fukuoka Ming agreed in a daze. Okay, Mom, let's go try the strawberry daifu that Ming bought first. Then Miko Fukuoka bounced downstairs like a child. Listening to the sound of Miko Fuka coming downstairs, Fuka Ming fell into silence again. After a while, he impatiently grabbed his hair. Why is it the Sword God domain? Said the boy irritably in the room, then he quieted down again. More than an hour later, wearing a black suit and holding a large bag of ingredients in his arms, the handsome uncle, who looked a bit strange, rang the doorbell of the Fukuoka family. Upon hearing this, Miyako Fukuoka immediately ran to open the door. I'm back, said Fukuoka as he walked into the door. Welcome home, my dear, replied Miyako Fukuoka with a smile. Miko Fukuoka took the ingredients and walked towards the kitchen. Fukuoka also hung his suit on the coat rack, changed into slippers, and walked into the kitchen. By the way, didn't you ask Mingxi to go buy groceries today? Fukawa gently hugged Fuka Miko's waist from behind and asked. Miko Fukuoka paused while washing vegetables. Mingxi said he forgot. Fuka Miko blushed slightly and replied, it feels like Mingxi is absent-minded today. He remembers to buy desserts, but he doesn't remember to buy groceries. Haha. Fukuoka Kanzuya chuckled and said, it seems that even if Ming-si doesn't remember to buy groceries, he will still remember that his mother would act rashly because she couldn't get dessert. Upon hearing this, Fukuoka Akira, who was coming down from upstairs, responded and said, yes, I can't stand my mother pretending to be angry, crying, making noise, and whimpering before because I didn't buy cherry cakes. After a pause, he said, even though she has been a mother with a child for 16 years, she always behaves like a child rolling on the ground because she cannot get her beloved toy. When Miko Fukuoka heard Waitsuri, she said, wow. Mingxi. How can I say that to my mother? My mother is angry. There are no 2 boxes of sweet dim sum. Here we go again, Fukuoka Ming said helplessly. Fukuoka Miko turned to Fukuoka Kenzuya and said, "Woo-woo. Darling, please take care of your son. Your son is bullying your wife again." "Ah, all right, all right, all right." Fukuoka also reached out and touched his wife's head, saying gently, "I know now. I will take good care of Mingxi, don't be angry." Miyako Fukuoka snorted lightly and continued to prepare dinner. As he walked to the living room, Fukuoka also sat on the sofa and said to Fukuoka Akira, "Come, Akira, sit down." Fukuoka Akira walked over and sat on the sofa. Fukuoka Kenzuya asked, "Mingxi, Mom said you were absent-minded today. Did something happen? Or did you start dating and rack your brains to prepare a surprise for your girlfriend?" Who is the woman?" "Naoi." Listening to Fukuoka's series of questions, Fukuoka Akira said helplessly, "Oh no, I'm not planning on dating at the moment. Besides, I've always treated Naoka as my younger sister." As long as it's okay, if you have anything to do, you must tell your parents," Fukuoka said with a smile. "I understand." Not long after, Miko Fukuoka finished dinner and whispered, "Mingxi, come and have dinner with Dad. I made a new Chinese dish. Sweet and sour pork ribs." Fukuoka, who was sitting on the sofa reading a newspaper, folded the newspaper and placed it on the coffee table. He pushed his glasses on his face and got up to walk towards the restaurant. Fukuoka Akira looked at the freshly broken Rubik's Cube in his hand and casually stuffed it into the storage box on the coffee table. He followed Fukuoka and walked into the restaurant. As soon as she sat down at the dining table, Miyako Fukuoka picked up a piece of pork ribs and brought it to Fukuoka Kenzuya's mouth. She looked at him with hopeful eyes, and Fukuoka Kenzuya smiled helplessly and ate the pork ribs. "How about it? Is it delicious?" Miko Fukuoka couldn't wait to ask. "Ah, the taste is very good. It's truly beautiful," Fukuoka smiled. "Hee." Fugang Miko smiled and leaned over to kiss Fugang Heya on the face. "Mua, then eat more." Then she gave him a few pieces of pork ribs. Fugang Mingxi, who was already immune to his parents' show of affection, had no expression on his face and calmly took a sip of miso soup. He had no waves in his heart, after all, he had been watching such scenes for 16 years and had long been accustomed to them. Halfway through the meal, Miyako Fukuoka suddenly said, "Oh, by the way, aren't you interested in that SAO, Mingxi? It's perfect for Dad to bring you that device tomorrow." Fukuoka also joked, "Is that so? It seems that our cool and abstinent genius handsome guy is also starting to be interested in games." Upon hearing Fukuoka Kenzuya's words, Fukuoka Akira pursed his lips and said indifferently, "As a high school student, I am not interested in games. What interests me is only the cutting-edge technology claimed to be the all.in.1 fully stealth device vGear of this century." "Ah, it's like this." Fukuoka also looked at Fukuoka Mingxi, who had a hard mouth, and didn't joke anymore. "Our company has indeed invested in Argus, and currently, whether it is the game SAO or the device vGear, our Fugang Group holds about 10% of the shares." Fukuoka also paused for a moment, took a sip of soup, and said, "In terms of technology alone, as a vGear with a new generation of diamond semiconductor core processors, it can indeed be said to be the most cutting-edge scientific research achievement of this century." "Can you get this set of equipment, Dad?" asked Fukuoka Mingxi. "Haha." Fukuoka also smiled and said, "Of course, vGear was actually released around May, and by November, there will be a limited edition vGear linked by SAO. As an investor, the company now happens to have several sets of finished products. These finished products were originally included in the 10,000 quota along with other equipment, and will be sold together when the time comes. But as the boss of the company, of course I can get a spot in advance." Fukuoka Mingxi sighed and said, "Alas, it's really the wicked capitalism. As a beneficiary of capitalism, what are you still lamenting here, kid? Fukuoka rubbed his head. Fukuoka Ming smiled and said, I'm wondering if you'll be hanging on the street lamp in the future, Dad. You kid, Fukuoka said helplessly. The next afternoon, Akira Fukuoka moved the cardboard box containing vGear into his room, opened it, and looked at the dark blue, helmet-style device, which was slightly silent. After a moment, he muttered to himself, although peaceful daily life is likable, what's the difference between continuing to savor fish in such a world and before? Chapter 4. Newly joined SAO. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Paradise Manufacturing used time acceleration, causing 2 months to pass. At 1 p.m. on November 6, 2022, the public beta of the Sword God domain officially began. Fukuoka Akira held vGear, his hands trembling slightly, and with an excited expression, he put it on his head. Lying in bed, Fukuoka Akira closed his eyes and said in an excited voice, "Link start." As the words fell, Akira Fukuoka felt his consciousness sinking. After passing through a colorful column, he arrived at an open space. The sound of a system prompt came in his ear, and after quickly kneading his face, Fukuoka Akira hesitated for a moment when selecting his ID, and then typed Fukuoka Akira as his ID. After a flash of white light, Akira Fukuoka felt like he was standing on the ground again. He opened his eyes and saw buildings full of medieval style around him, and the system prompt showed the words, "Starting town." Looking around, Akira Fukuoka found himself standing on a very large square with a large clock hanging in the center of the clock tower. Fukuoka Akira glanced at the time and at 13.10, many players with different appearances and hair colors had already appeared on the square. Some people who may have met in the real world gathered together and started chatting happily. Looking at these excited players with their faces on, Akira Fukuoka remained silent and turned his head towards the weapons store. As early as a month ago, Akira Fukuoka had already obtained first-hand information about the SAO beta test through an internal account of Fukuoka Group. It can even be said that Akira Fukuoka has a better understanding of this world than some beta testers. After buying a one-handed sword with the game currency known as Kyle, which was initially given as a gift in the weapons store, Fukuoka Akira rushed towards the training area outside the city at the fastest speed. After reaching the training zone, Fukuoka Ming had already pulled out his sword from behind towards a monster named Maniac Mountain Pig, swung his movements, and used his sword skills towards it. Horizontal slash. Fukuoka Ming whispered. A layer of blue light appeared on his sword body, and then Fukuoka Akira swung his sword blade, which swept through the air, leaving scattered blue light in the air, hitting the head of the Manic Mountain Pig. The HP value of the Mad Mountain Pig drops sharply, and as the HP value clears, the Mad Mountain Pig's body expands and explodes, shattering into countless shimmering, glass-like fragments of light. A white panel appeared in the center of Fukuoka Akashi's line of sight, with the purple letters, EXP+10, written on the lower layer, and, Wild Boar Fur *1, and, Coal *17, written on the loot column on the upper layer of the panel. The Maniac Mountain Pig, which is equivalent to Slim, is only a level 1 monster. The AI for attacking and searching for enemies is at the lowest level, and it only requires 1 or 2 sword skills to solve it. Although the experience value given by the Mad Mountain Pig is not high, it can be used quickly and without any danger. Fukuoka Akira, who still had some concerns about this world, naturally chose to use it for leveling. After a few hours, Akira Fukuoka's level had reached level 2. Looking at the empty training area with few monsters in sight, Akira Fukuoka took a breath. The time in the lower right corner of the line of sight shows 17.28, and the extremely realistic sun in the game emits an orange-red light, which looks no different from the real world, making it difficult to distinguish between reality and the game. Looking at the jumping time display, Fukuoka Akira whispered, "Come on, come on." At the moment when the time display reached 17.30, Fukuoka Akira was enveloped in a blue light, and the dazzling light made him close his eyes. When the light dissipated, Akira Fukuoka also opened his eyes and was transported to the square of the starting town. At this moment, the square was filled with people, and others were constantly being teleported over. Some of these players have a bewildered expression, while others are very impatient, with various voices intertwined in the square. What's going on? Why was it teleported to the starting town? What about the logout button? Why is the logout button gone? What does the game official do to deal with this vicious bug right after the game's launch? Where's GM? Hurry up and ask GM to come out and solve the problem. Fukuoka Ming silently watched the restless players and thought to himself, there is no GM left in this game now, and the only person with permission is the developer of SAO. Akihiko Momocha. Just as the players were shouting, "Let me log out quickly," the sky suddenly became dark. In the sky 100 meters above their heads, which was also the bottom of the second layer of Eindhoven, in an instant, it was blocked by a red hexagonal, chessboard-like light curtain. Warning and system announcement are all written in the hexagonal light curtain. The players looked at this light curtain and thought it was the GM who had solved the bug, so they breathed a sigh of relief. However, as soon as the players let go of their worries, many blood-like substances suddenly seeped out of the gaps in the chessboard like grid in the sky. However, those blood-like substances did not drip onto the ground, but instead gathered in the air, forming a huge red cloak. The deep red cloak was the style worn by the GM during the testing period, which was held by Argus members. Those players who have experienced beta testing are also relieved, although it is slightly different from the GM during the beta testing period. Now the face of the cloak is completely empty, and the entire cloak cannot be seen to have any physical appearance inside. Hey! GM! Hurry up and let us out. The players started arguing again, hurry up and fix the bug. What's getting stuck in the game like? I saw the cloak open its arms, revealing its hands wearing white gloves and saying a sentence. Welcome to my world, players. This sentence immediately quieted down the square. At this moment, a player standing in the crowd, with shoulder-length short hair and a straight face, heard this sentence and his pupils furrowed slightly, murmuring, "Mine, the world." His ID in the upper left corner shows Kirito. Standing next to him, wearing a simple leather armor and a slender figure resembling a warring states warrior, the person asked, "Tongren, what does this sentence mean?" Before the Tongren could answer, the cloak said, "My name is Jingyan Mao Chang, the only person who can control this world now. What are you talking about?" Many players said irritably. The cloak continued as if it had not been heard. I think all players should have noticed the situation where the logout button disappears from the menu interface. But this is not a problem with the game. I'll repeat it again, this is not a problem with the game, but the original version of Sword Art Online Sword God Domain, the person like a warrior said in a hoarse and deep voice, "Ben." The original version. Mao Chang Jingyan's voice was calm and without any waves, saying, "From now on, you will not be able to log out of the game on your own until you reach the top of this castle." As soon as this sentence spread, all the players exploded. What a joke! How could this be possible? Chapter 5. Death Game SAO. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The players on the square all questioned incredulously. How could such a thing be possible? It's just a game, how could it be impossible to log out? Mao Chang Jingyan ignored the players and continued to speak in a calm voice. Furthermore, there is no way to rely on external personnel to stop or deactivate the operation of any vGear. If anyone tries to do this. When the atmosphere on the entire square was so solemn that it was difficult to breathe, Mao Chang Jingyan spoke the latter half of the sentence. So the signal components of vGear will emit microwaves, damaging everyone's brains and stopping their life activities. Silence. The square sank into silence. The players looked at each other, and after a moment, Mao Chang Jingyan's words seemed to have dropped a bomb in the crowd, causing everyone to explode completely. No, it's impossible. How could such a thing be done? The person with a samurai face and an ID named Klein said to the Tongren, Tongren. Tongren, this is impossible, isn't it? A gaming device can't do such a thing, can it? Tongren didn't answer, just looked at Mao Changjinyan in a daze. This is achievable, said Tomioka Akira, walking over not far away. He whispered to Tongren and Klein. vGear is composed of countless signal components buried inside, emitting weak electromagnetic waves, stimulating brain nerve cells to produce a feeling of doing something. Although it is indeed the most cutting-edge super technology at present, its basic principle was already accepted by all households of Neon as early as 40 years ago. That is, the microwave. As long as there is sufficient output power, vGear can easily cause the water in our brain to rub and vibrate, producing high heat and steaming the brain. Klein retorted, indeed. But this must just be a scare. As long as the power cord of vGear is unplugged, it won't be able to emit high-frequency electromagnetic waves. As long as it doesn't have a large capacity battery inside. His voice stopped, he opened his mouth slightly, but couldn't make a sound. Tongren took his words and continued, it does indeed have batteries, and it is a battery that accounts for 1/3 of the total weight of the helmet. Klein said in a daze, what about a power outage? Mao Changjinyan seemed to have heard his words and then said. More accurately, if the external power supply is cut off for more than 10 minutes, the network is disconnected for more than 2 hours, or if an attempt is made to damage the vGear body or release its fixed lock, only under these conditions will the brain damage program be executed, and these conditions have already been disclosed to the real world through our company and the media. By the way, at this point in time, many players' families and friends have ignored our warnings and attempted to forcibly release vGear, but the result is. Everyone swallowed their saliva and waited for his message. Unfortunately, currently there are 213 players who have permanently exited the real world and 9 Grand Ray. Silence reignited on the field, as a heavier bomb exploded in the player's heart, and everyone showed an incredulous expression. The Tongren retreated with a slight tremble, taking a few steps back, and Klein collapsed directly on the ground. Fukuoka Ming closed his mouth a few times before finally closing it tightly. 213 players. This number surrounds everyone's ears like a heavy hammer, repeatedly hitting their hearts. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Klein said hoarsely, it's just to scare people. This kind of thing can't be done. Stop talking nonsense. Let me go out quickly. I don't have time to play with you here. Struggling to stand up from the ground, Klein continued, that's right. All of this is a game activity, a performance for the beginning of the game, right? Surrounding players also joined in. But as if to shatter everyone's hope, Mao Changjinyan's flat voice, like a report work, once again sounded. You don't need to worry about your physical condition in reality. All TV, radio, and online media are constantly reporting on this situation and the appearance of many victims. So the possibility of the vGear being forcibly lifted on your heads has been reduced to a relatively low level. In the future, your bodies should be transferred to hospitals or other places for careful care during the 2-hour disconnection period of vGear. So I hope everyone can rest assured, putting spirit on strategy games. What? What? What are you talking about? Shouted the Tongren. Why do you want us to focus on strategy games? In this situation, focus on strategy games. He glared fiercely at the figure in mid-air and continued to shout. This can no longer be considered a game. As if following the words of the Tongren, Mao Changjinyan said in a declarative tone. However, I hope everyone pays special attention that Sword Art Online Sword God Domain is no longer a game for everyone, but a different real world. In the future, there will no longer be a resurrection mechanism in the game, so when the HP value is cleared, all characters will disappear forever, and everyone can fully anticipate what he will say next. Your brains will be destroyed by vGear. Everyone looked at the HP value displayed in the upper left corner of their line of sight and fell into a long silence. As Mao Changjinyan said, when the horizontal bar emitting a light blue light is cleared, they will die. This is indeed a game, a life and death game. RPG games like Sword God Domain should be able to gain experience points and improve skills through continuous death and resurrection. During the testing period, the Sword God Domain was indeed like this. After players die, they will be resurrected in the palace in the north of the square. The Black Iron Palace. But now it's said that there's no way to resurrect. And once you die, you will really lose your life. I can't even stop the game. It's really too foolish, murmured the Tongren. Under these conditions, how could anyone risk their lives to enter the danger zone? Isn't it good to hide in a safe urban area and wait for external rescue? But Mao Changjingyan's next words completely removed this idea from the hearts of the players. There is only one condition that can liberate everyone from this game, that's what I just mentioned. Reaching the top 100 floors of Ain Grande and defeating the final boss there. I guarantee that at that time, all surviving players can safely log out of the game. 10,000 players fell silent. There are gifts that I have given to you in your item list, please confirm. Tongren opened the item list and found an additional item called Hand Mirror inside. He took it out and it was a square mirror. While all the players were puzzled, suddenly someone's body was enveloped by a blue light similar to when teleporting, and others gradually did the same. Soon, everyone was shining in the light, and the square was illuminated to the point where people couldn't open their eyes. After the light dissipated, everyone was surprised to find that their faces had changed to their real-life appearance. Some people on the square who originally looked like lovers suddenly turned into two men, with their arms wrapped together, creating a tense atmosphere. Male sign burn up. And Mao Changjingyan's voice continued to ring. You must be thinking about why does Sword Art Online and vGear developer Akihiko Momocha do this kind of thing? Actually, my goal has been achieved. I'm just creating this world to watch. So Sword Art Online was created, and now, everything has been achieved. Now concludes the official operation tutorial of Sword Art Online. Good luck to all players. After speaking, the cloak in the sky suddenly disappeared, and the chessboard-like light curtain disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. The orange sunset shone down again, as if nothing had happened. After a brief silence, the roars of players filled the entire square. What a joke! Let me out now. Who has the mood to join you here to conquer this terrible game? Mao Changjingyan, my *** mother. You ** are gone. The chaotic voice in his ear made Fukuoka Ming frown slightly. He said to Kirito and Klein, come with me, this is not the place to talk. Then he led them to a slightly quieter alley by the square. Chapter 6. Conversations and Hidden Tasks. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After entering the alley, Akira Fukuoka turned around and said, sorry, I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Akira Fukuoka. Ah, it's okay. I'm Klein, and this person with a cute and straight face is a person from Tongren, Klein replied proficiently. Fukuoka Akira made a strange look between Klein and Kirito. The nervous Klein didn't notice Fukuoka Ming's gaze. Fukuoka. Such a familiar surname, Klein said, touching his chin. Fukuoka. Tongren pondered for a moment and realized, is it Fukuoka from the Fukuoka group? Fukuoka Akira nodded and looked at them, that's right, it's one of the main investors in this game and vGear, the Fukuoka group. Hey! Klein exclaimed in surprise. I'm very sorry, but due to our company's poor inspection, we didn't find any issues with this game, which put your lives in danger, Tomioka Akira said in a slightly apologetic tone. Klein lightly poked Tongren's arm and whispered, Tongren, does it mean that wealthy people speak in this formulaic way? Then he touched the back of his head and smiled. It's okay, it's not your problem. Fukuoka Ming watched as he remained silent. At this moment, Tongren said in a cautious voice, why did you come to us? Fukuoka Akira spread out his hands and said, well, to be precise, I'm here to find you, Kirito. Tongren frowned and looked at him, waiting for his explanation. I have learned most of the content of the beta testing through our company's internal data, which also includes information about all beta testing players, said Akira Fukuoka. I am looking for you for two purposes. First, to get to know the renowned expert among beta players. Tongren, second, to come to you as a real-life identity. In reality. Identity. Tongren said in confusion. That's right, I'm a disciple of Grandpa Tongu. Let's just consider myself a disciple, Fukuoka Ming replied. I knew your identity when I saw your information survey form. Wow, terrible capital, exclaimed Klein, who heard them talking next to him. Well, capital is indeed terrifying, but I usually don't use it easily, Tomoka Akira smiled and leaned his head. He turned his head and his expression became serious. Let's stop chatting, Tongren. Tongren was a bit uncomfortable with his serious gaze and turned his head to say, what exactly are you trying to say? It's simple, Tongren. If possible, please try not to expose your identity as a beta player. Why? Tongren frowned and asked. Fukuoka Akira did not give a direct answer. The identity of the beta players will not be very popular. Although the problem has not been exposed yet, as time goes on. Staring into Tongren's eyes, Fukuoka Ming said word by word, the selfishness and greed in human nature can create a gap between sealed beta players and ordinary players. He pursed his lips and continued, it may not be visible in the short term, but it will eventually explode. Both of them fell silent, and the air gradually quieted down. Seemingly unable to bear the dull atmosphere, Klein interrupted and said, it's okay. Tongren is so smart, he will know how to do it. Well, that's all. You can take this as advice from a friend. Even for Grandpa Tongu and Naoka, please cherish your life. Fukuoka Ming said softly, then I'll leave first. After hesitating for a moment, Tongren said, why don't you join us? I know many efficient training areas and safe paths forward. I don't know less than you, because I am the heir of the capitalist family, said Fukuoka Ming with a slight curl in his mouth. Tongren laughed and said, all right, then add a friend. Don't die, Grandpa doesn't accept apprentices very much. You should be the only disciple. Don't make Grandpa sad. Fukuoka Ming agreed and walked towards the outside of the alley. Seeing Tomioka Akira walking away, Kirito turned his head to look at Klein and said, we should also set off now. VRMO RPG games like Sword God Domain have limited resources and experience, and now we need to hurry a bit. He quickly called up the map from the menu and spoke quickly. We can now take the following village as our destination and level up on the road, which can maximize efficiency and should be able to reach before most people. While speaking, Tongren marked something on the map. I know a very good route, which is both safe and has a lot of experience points. It will arrive tomorrow morning from now on. Klein, you can also come along. Tongren said as he put away the map. Sorry, Tongren, Klein said with his head lowered. Tongren was stunned for a moment. I can't go with you. I have real-life companions here, and I can't leave them behind, Klein explained. We were queuing up together a few days ago to stay up late buying games. How could we possibly leave our companions behind just to survive? Tongren was calculating in his heart. Besides Klein, even if he brought 3 or 4 more, no, even if he only brought one more person, the safest route could still be dangerous. Looking at the conflicted Tongren, Klein smiled heartily and said, don't worry, it's hard to say anything else. At least I think I have some talent in the game. He pointed his thumb at his side and said, I have also been a guild president in other games. The skills you taught me are enough. I will survive, don't worry. Tongren looked at him, gritted his teeth, and said, well. Take care of yourself. I'll leave first. Okay, Klein replied, by the way, Tongren, your face is quite cute, I like it. Klein's joking words diluted the tense atmosphere, and Tongren also laughed, saying, "Your down-and-out warrior face fits perfectly." Then he ran towards the other end of the alley. After Tongren left, Klein also returned to the square to search for his friends. A few days later, in another area of the starting town, Akira Fukuoka looked at the map looking for something. The courtyard with wisteria patterns. The one with wisteria patterns has been found. Akira Fukuoka said excitedly. Hidden missions that even beta testers haven't noticed. Looking at the courtyard walls and doors with wisteria flowers printed on them, that's right, Fukuoka Akira even bribed an Argus game producer through the method of reaching out to hundreds of millions of people and obtained a task distribution map from him. The reward for this task is said to be particularly generous, but I don't know the specific content of the task because it didn't go through my hands. This is the Argus member's description of the task that Fukuoka Ming is currently looking for. Fukuoka Akira has searched through all the quests that players in the beta have completed, but has not found any information related to this mission. Although there is no information about this task, there is a description of the location where the task will be taken. In the east of the town where the first floor starts, in a house with wisteria patterns. It's hard not to associate Fukuoka Akira with another organization that prints wisteria patterns around their home. The Fujino family, which provides assistance to the ghost-killing team. But Akira Fukuoka didn't think much, thinking it was just a coincidence. After all, in SAO, things like the Fujino family and the ghost-killing team are too ridiculous. Chapter 7. Is it really a ghost-killing team? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Pushing open the door that appeared to have a long history, Akira Fukuoka cautiously walked in. Inside is a traditional Japanese-style wooden house, surrounded by wisteria flowers. Fukuoka Akira took out his weapon, looked around, and walked towards the wooden house after realizing there was no obvious danger. As the wooden house door was pushed open, the bearing of the door made a creaking sound. The room is very spacious, and the tightly closed windows leave no light in the room. The only light comes from the newly opened door. Fukuoka Ming's feet stepped on the floor, raising the dust on the floor. The dust dispersed in the light and looked like a thin mist in the winter morning. This realistic scene once again made Tomioka Akira marvel at the technical strength of the Sword God domain. He observed the surrounding environment and saw that there was only one table in the huge room, with a black-covered notebook on the table. Fukuoka Akira tried to pick up his notebook, but the black cover of the notebook was empty with no handwriting or patterns. He gently opened the notebook, revealing the yellowed paper leaves inside. The notebook, full of historical atmosphere, was filled with dark brown text, as if it had dried up blood. A long time ago, after the sun set in Ain Grande, there would be a monster called a demon appearing. Fukuoka Akira read the words in his notebook and frowned slightly. Hiss, why is this plot so familiar? Forget it, keep looking. Fukuoka Ming said as he flipped through his notebook, evil ghosts feed on humans. They are powerful and possess various strange spells. My eyes are getting more and more familiar. Fukuoka Ming scratched him, isn't this just ghost extermination? He was a bit disorganized and said, why does Ain Grande have Ghost Slayer? Do they still have Breath Method or Ghost Slayer Squad? Looking at the notebook, he felt very puzzled and said, it's strange to see ghost destruction in SAO. And all the evil spirits originated from the legendary Ghost King. In order to fight against the evil spirits, people united to form ghost-killing teams, the notebook wrote. Aha! Are you really a ghost-killing team? Akira Fukuoka was greatly shocked. He looked at his notebook and was a bit stunned before continuing to read. At the beginning, ghost-killing teams could only bind evil spirits and wait for the sun to appear. Because evil spirits would turn into flying ash when they touched the sun. Even the settings are the same, said Akira Fukuoka. I think we're going to talk about breathing techniques next. Sure enough, it was written in the notebook that it was not until later that someone found a mineral containing the energy of the sun. Weapons made from this mineral could eliminate evil spirits by chopping off their heads. And, a swordsman from a ghost-killing team invented a special breathing method by imitating the waves of the sun. This breathing method can greatly improve a person's physical fitness and cause damage to evil spirits. Indeed, its breathing technique, Fukuoka Ming smiled. Is there any descendant of the ghost-killing team in the Sword God Domain production team? Slowly, the notebook flipped to the last page. Through breathing techniques and a special weapon named the Sun Will Blade, the Ghost Slayer team gained almost the same strength as the evil spirits. But in the face of the powerful Ghost King, the ghost-killing team did their utmost to only make the Ghost King seriously injured and escape. At the end of the note, it is written that for future generations, if you are willing to become a ghost killer swordsman and slay the Ghost King, please go to the backyard to obtain breathing technique and Sun Will Saber. As Akira Fukuoka finished reading his notes, a system panel appeared in front of him, which read, "Do you want to take on the mission? The Demon King left behind for thousands of years." There is also a red font under the task name. Task items can be claimed after receiving the task. Fukuoka Akira confirmed, took the task, and then walked into the backyard. Sure enough, he found a knife stored in a black scabbard under a cherry blossom tree in the backyard, with a scroll beside it. He picked up the knife and scroll, and the system immediately displayed. Get 1 Sun Will Blade and passive skill Water Breath. Click on the detailed information. The information on the Sun Will Blade is a powerful weapon cast from special minerals that can cause damage to evil spirits, but it is currently in a sealed state and requires completing a special task to unlock. The equipment level limit is level 5. Need to reach level 5 to equip Breath of Water. A special skill that upgrades differently from regular skills. It can provide additional attribute points for character upgrades. The attributes are divided into strength value and agility value. Strength value affects strength, stamina, defense, and maximum health. Agility value affects speed, reaction, and attack speed. Fukuoka Akira glanced at the basic attributes of the Sun Will Blade and was immediately shocked. As a weapon that can be equipped at level 5, its attack power is as high as 20 points, which is a data that many level 10 weapons can achieve. He found that there was another strange thing about this Japanese will knife, which was its durability value of infinity. The following label states that the Japanese will knife will be damaged, but it will not disappear, even if only the handle is left, it can be repaired. After equipping Water Breath on the skill bar, Akira Fukuoka discovered that there were 10 additional small skill bars under the Water Breath bar, which were the 10 sword techniques of Water Breath. It's really useful. A skill bar directly includes sword techniques for attack, defense, and assault, he exclaimed. As a person who is afraid of trouble, Tomioka has always kept things simple, and the skill bar setting in the realm of swords has made him roast for a long time. Because in the Sword God domain, all skills that need to be used must be equipped in the skill bar. If you want to replace other skills, you need to first remove the skills that need to be replaced from the skill bar, and then add the skills that need to be replaced to it. Different types of weapons occupy the skill bar separately. If corresponding skills are not added to the skill bar, even if the correct sword technique activation action is made, the sword technique activation judgment cannot be triggered. Even if forcefully attacked, it will only be considered a regular attack. Another very important point is that life skills and swordsmanship share a skill column, and there is no such thing as a life skills column. And skills cannot be changed while in combat mode. There are also some other skills, such as searching for enemies and hiding, that can only be used in the skill bar. A person's skill bar is limited, initially only having 2 skill bars, then increasing to 3 at level 6, 4 at level 12, 5 at level 20, and an additional one for every 10 level increase thereafter. So this also leads to most players not equipping life skills in the early stages in order to fully acquire sword skills as soon as possible. With the sun will blade and water breath, Akira Fukuoka is now able to walk horizontally in most areas of the first floor, which greatly boosts his confidence. Fukuoka Ming looked at his taskbar, ready to start working on the task, but when he saw the task introduction, he chose to give up. Because the task description states that the Ghost King who escaped from the ghost killing team is now located on the 50th floor of Ein Grande, hidden in a forest there. Before killing the Ghost King, there will be a demon every 5 floors, and only when all the demons before the 50th floor die will the Ghost King appear. On the other side of the task prompt, it is written. The first evil ghost is in the maze area of Carlin on the 5th floor of England. In the maze area, there will be a unique messenger creature of the ghost-killing team. The Raven. Leading you to search for the evil ghost. Please go and eliminate the evil spirits as soon as possible. Looking at the task, Fukuoka Akira pursed his lips and thought to himself. It will take some time to conquer the 5th level. Chapter 8. Cutting off the confusion in the heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Akira Fujioka stepped out of the wooden house, the sky in Ein Grande had already darkened, and the main street of the starting town not far away lit up. Not like an electric light, but more like a smokeless kerosene lamp. The light is orange in color, making people feel unusually warm in this terrifying death game. Fukuoka Akira reached out his hand, opened his palm, and looked at the hand that was illuminated by light and also turned orange. It's really unbelievable, he sighed slightly. After standing quietly for a while, Fukuoka Ming suddenly clenched the hand that had been spread out, revealing the pattern of the palm, as if grasping the light of the street lamp. Those beta players are probably about to reach the 3rd town on the 1st floor now, and I can't fall behind either. I must speed up the progress. Fukuoka Ming breathed a sigh of relief and whispered to himself. He entered the store, replenished the supplies needed for the battle, and prepared to leave the starting town for the next town. Just as he was about to leave the city, a trembling figure sitting on a flower bed near the hotel with one arm wrapped around his legs came into his sight. Fukuoka Akira slowly walked towards the figure, only to find that it was a slender player wearing a cloak. The cloak covered him tightly, making it impossible to see his appearance clearly, and even his gender could not be confirmed. The player saw Fukuoka Akira approaching and cautiously took a few steps back. Looking at the player who was retreating, Akira Fukuoka explained awkwardly, sorry, I thought it was some kind of mission, so I came over. The player remained silent, with his face covered in a cloak facing Tomioka Akira. Although he couldn't see his eyes, he could make people feel that he or she was looking at him or her. I'm not a good person. I'm not a bad person, Fukuoka Ming quickly waved his hand and said, his scalp tingling from the vague gaze. The person in the cloak finally spoke up, bad people will say they are not bad, and this sentence is as ineffective as the police's don't move. Her voice was soft with a stern tone, clearly female. Well, that's right. It's not convincing to just say that you're not a bad person in words. Tomioka Ming touched his chin and said. The player did not respond, and the atmosphere fell silent again. Forget it, don't get bogged down in this matter. Get to know each other. Fukuoka Akira broke his silence and said, I'm Fukuoka Akira. It seems that Fukuoka Akira was surprised by the shameless continuation of the conversation, but the player did not respond immediately. Just when even Fukuoka Akira felt embarrassed about committing cancer, the player said in a crisp voice, Yasina. Fukuoka Ming didn't hear clearly and asked again, what are you saying? The name is Athena, Athena repeated. Oh, I got it, Fukuoka Akira quickly said. Yasina. His pupils shook on the spot. What's wrong, is there any problem? Asna was slightly puzzled. No problem, he said with an embarrassed smile. Yasina felt something was wrong, but she didn't know where it was, so she had to stare at Fukuoka Ming with a skeptical gaze under her cloak. Ah, by the way, you should be a female player, Akira Fukuoka brought up the topic. Upon hearing his imperceptible words, Yasina seemed a bit annoyed. What's wrong with the female player? She rushed up to Akira Fukuoka and looked up at his face, saying. After lifting her head, the light of the street lamp finally shone into the cloak, revealing Athena's delicate face. In those amber eyes, her current emotions were revealed. Fukuoka Ming looked at the beautiful girl with a slight anger on her face and stayed in place, without even answering Asuna's questions. He felt like the little deer in his heart was about to kill him. In the past, Akira Fukuoka did not believe in love at first sight, believing that so-called love at first sight was all based on sexual desire, but now he wants to retract this viewpoint. Sure enough, everyone is a double standard. Upon seeing Tomioka Akira stunned, Yasina frowned and said, "Hey, I'm asking you something. What's wrong with female players?" Fukuoka Akira, who had reacted, turned his face unnaturally to conceal the blush on his face and cursed in his heart why vGear was acting so realistically. He pretended to be indifferent and said, "Oh, it's nothing, just a little surprised." Surprise? Why be surprised? Asuna asked in confusion. Well, haven't you noticed? Female players in the Sword God domain are like cherishing animals, and beautiful girls like you are even more rare. Fukuoka Ming replied. He rubbed his face hard, trying to make it more natural. Yasina pursed her lips and said, "What, it's just like that." Then she said in a slightly harsh tone. "It's impolite to use animals or something to describe girls, isn't it?" Fukuoka Ming awkwardly touched his nose and quickly explained, hug. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean that." The seriousness on Yasina's face did not diminish, which made Fukuoka Ming even more panicked. His hands were moving in the air, as if trying to express himself clearly. Looking at Fukuoka Ming, who seemed very embarrassed, Yasina chuckled and slowly said, "Well, forget it. I don't think you really meant that either." As she spoke, she took off the hood of her cloak and completely exposed her face. After taking off her hood, Yasina reached out and pulled her hair out from under her cloak. So beautiful. Fukuoka Ming sighed in his heart. Yasina's soft chestnut long straight hair swayed in the air, then obediently pressed against her back. A fair face, with pink lips slightly curved upwards, the whole person looks gentle and quiet. Fukuoka Ming was stunned again and shouted in his heart. Great! vGear race high. Sword God domain race high. It's really great that vGear can be so realistic. It's like completely forgetting the embarrassment just now. Feeling the constantly rising temperature on his face, Akira Fukuoka knew without looking that his face must be redder than the spicy crayfish now. He took a few deep breaths and forced himself to calm down. "Well, why don't you go to the wilderness to practice and rest at the hotel?" Tomioka Akira asked for a topic. Yasina turned her head and looked elsewhere without speaking. "Well, it's okay if you don't want to say it," Fukuoka Ming said softly upon seeing the situation. "Actually, it's not something that can't be said." Athena lowered her head and said, I'm just a little scared. If I can't sleep, I might as well not sleep." Without waiting for Fukuoka Akira to ask, Yasina continued, "Staying in this false world always makes one feel abandoned by reality." She sat back on the flower bed, holding her bent and arched knees in her arms. "I have always been afraid to die in this world. I didn't dare to go into the wilderness, so I stayed in the hotel all the time. I didn't know what to do next," said Asuna with a hint of tears in her voice. After a moment of calmness, Asuna whispered, "I'm sorry, I poured bitterness on you even though it was our first time meeting. It's okay, and the next thing to do is very simple." Fukuoka Akira smiled. Athena looked up at him and let out a skeptical nasal sound. "I said, it's very simple." Akira Fukuoka's voice was firm and confident. Next, as long as you pass this game and leave this world, you don't have to be afraid. The young man's eyes seemed to sparkle as he gently said to Yasina, as long as you are careful, slowly and step by step, you can definitely pass the level and skills. Since Mao Changjingyan wants us to survive through the strategy game, let's show it to him. Tomoka Mingsi said loudly, if it's a dying ending, then Mao Changjingyan won't let us go in strategy. Instead of hiding in a safe zone and slowly decaying, it's better to try hard. Try it. Asna pondered. Yes, even if you lose to the monster and die, you won't lose to this game. This world. Tomoka Mingsi smiled and said, and after fighting with your companions, dying to protect and save them is not very romantic, is it? The confusion on Yasina's face gradually faded away, and she looked at the smiling Fukuoka Ming. The corner of her mouth curved upwards and she said, Zhong Er. Ah Lu. I thought you said it was very handsome, the young man said, touching the back of his head, with a faint blush on his face. Well, it's not bad, Yasina chuckled lightly. It's really quite handsome. Hee, the young man chuckled proudly after hearing it, and then reached out his hand to Yasina, saying, how about coming with me? What? Together, what? Asna asked in confusion. Let's break through this world with me and return to reality, Fukuoka Akira explained. Let's conquer this game together and no longer be afraid to continue. Then he made a team request to Yasina. After hearing the boy's words, Yasina smiled softly and replied, I understand. She reached out and clicked to agree to form a team. Chapter 9. Blade wrapped around water flow. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Because he teamed up with Yasina, Fukuoka Akira gave up the overnight journey and chose to rest well in the hotel for a night. Early the next morning, Fukuoka Ming and Yasina left the starting town and headed to the next town to the north. Haruka Village. A place more suitable to describe as a village than a town. They are planning to go directly to Tulbana, which is closest to the maze area, and practice while advancing on the road. Between the starting town and Haruka village is a vast plain, where low-level wild animal monsters such as wild boars and wolves, as well as low-level insect monsters such as beetles and wasps, are generally generated. Due to the large number of players, the monster generation speed on the plains closer to the starting town has slowed down. To efficiently level up, one can only go to the forest to the northwest of the starting town and the swamp to the northeast, or directly enter the maze area. By the way, Yasina, you've been to some places up front, haven't you? Fukuoka Akira turned his head and said to Yasina, why have you returned to the starting town again? Well, how to put it? It's probably because she was abandoned by her companions to cherish the props and almost died, and she was afraid, Asna answered gently. What, can someone who abandons their teammates for props still be called a companion? But in this kind of game, it's common to behave unintentionally when facing danger. Akira Fukuoka defended Yasina, but he didn't say anything absolutely. Yasina stopped and said, so, what do you mean, Mingsi? Maybe she didn't actually mean it. Yeah, isn't it normal for people to behave irrationally in times of danger? Akira Fukuoka spread out his hand and said, after all, keeping humans rational forever is a luxury. Well, can Ming Sijuan, the second-grade student, also think of such philosophical words? Yasina said with a smile. Fukuoka Mingsi's face turned red. Ha! Ha, of course it is. Then he quickly turned his head to look at Yasina with his spare light. The girl's smiling expression made his face even redder. Fukuoka Mingsi couldn't resist Yasina's gaze in the end and said awkwardly, all right, stop looking at me like this. This sentence wasn't from me, it was from a science fiction writer. Yasina finally let go of him, quickening her pace to surpass Akira Fukuoka, and then taking a brisk step, humming an unknown song with a smile on her face. Fukuoka Mingsi also laughed and followed in her footsteps. Oh, by the way, Yasina, do you want to update your equipment? There are bronze weapons in the weapons store in Haruka village that are better than the initial equipment. Fukuoka Ming suddenly asked. Well, yes, Athena replied, because I sold some more advanced weapons when I returned to the starting town before, and I had planned to stay there for a few more days. Haha. Haha. The culprit who pulled Yasina out of the starting town awkwardly smiled. Ah, then. Let's go to Haruka village to prepare for it. I happen to have to go there to strengthen my weapons, Fukuoka Ming said calmly, avoiding Yasina's gaze. Well, it's possible. After an hour and a half, Akira Fukuoka and Yasina arrived at Haruka village, a small village located in the forest. After spending some more time purchasing and upgrading weapons in the weapons store, they left Haruka village directly and rushed to Talbana. In fact, there is another task in Haruka village, and after completing it, you can get a pretty good one-handed sword called Tough Practice Sword. On the way to Talbana, Fukuoka Ming said to Yasina, but because you used a thin sword, I didn't take the task. That task was quite troublesome. Hey. But Ming, you also use a one-handed sword, right? Don't you need that weapon? Because I have a better one. Then he took out the sun-will knife like a child showing off a new toy and handed it to Yasina. Taking over the sun-will blade, Yasina checked her attributes and was immediately surprised. Hey. Why is the attribute of this weapon so high? Fukuoka Ming picked up the knife and slowly pulled the blade out of its sheath, revealing the water blue blade. Wow, what a beautiful knife! Asuna exclaimed softly. Hee hee. The young man smiled a little proudly and pulled a beautiful sword flower in the air. This weapon is a hidden mission prop, but it can be used freely. That's it, but this knife is not just that, Yasina nodded. Otherwise, relying solely on a knife with good attributes at the lower level would probably not make you so happy. That's right, this knife has no limit on the number of times it can be tried to strengthen, but there's also one very powerful aspect. Fukuoka Akira smiled even brighter. That's. The girl patted him and said, don't play tricks. Fukuoka Ming quickly said, as each floor rises by 5 floors, after completing the hidden task stage, you can also receive one special enhancement. The success rate for special enhancements is 100%. For each special enhancement completed, this knife will gain a special attribute. This is too, the girl whispered. That's too abnormal, isn't it? Fukuoka Ming followed her words, although hidden missions only last until the 50th level, after obtaining 10 special attributes, this knife will definitely be stronger than weapons on higher floors. Indeed, agreed Yasina on the side. After a while, Akira Fukuoka suddenly said. There's a good task between Haruka village and Talbana that offers a lot of experience points, and it's not too difficult. You're still with us on the way. Do you want to give it a try? Sure. But you haven't been out of the starting town before, have you? Why do you know so much? Asuna agreed and questioned again. Fukuoka Ming touched his chin and said, well. I actually started preparing for this game a long time ago. Hey. Are you also a beta player, Ming? Well, if you insist, it's barely worth it. Players who haven't undergone beta testing before. What? What does it mean? Asuna turned into a bean-eyed question. I haven't participated in the beta test before, Fukuoka Ming replied, but I know even more than beta test players. The player's understanding of monsters in beta testing is nothing more than their distribution, attack methods, dropped objects, and special mechanisms, but I am not just that. A month before entering the game, I spent about 20 days recording the health, attack power, refresh time of most monsters, and even the body data of over 40 different levels of defending and wilderness bosses. What about the attack method? Didn't you remember? Asuna wondered. Whenever there is a magical setting in Ein Grande Terry, I would spend more time memorizing the attack methods, but unfortunately not. Fukuoka Akira shrugged. Actually, the attack methods of Ein Grande Terry monsters are easy to remember. Just remember the sword techniques of different weapons. You should know that monsters, like players, can also use swordsmanship, right? He said to Yasina. Yasina replied, well, this is completely different from some of the small games I used to play. So just treat the monsters as alternative players, said Akira Fukuoka. Players' swordsmanship will affect bosses' abilities. However, the effects achieved by bosses using sword skills are slightly different from those of players, such as larger range and higher damage. Hey! Is this like this? So, what about non-weapon animals, insect monsters, and other special monsters? Asna asked with a shocked expression. The young man smiled slightly and said, monsters like animal and insect species would be better solved. When the game was first designed, all the designers of the Sword God domain in the Argus community were given 2 months off. Is there any connection between this and monsters? Asna asked in confusion. Of course, those designers' vacations were not for nothing. They all used this vacation to visit the origin of various animals and insects and conducted on-site inspections. What do you mean? That's right, those animal and insect monsters are basically the same as real animal and insect monsters. That is to say, the only thing that really needs to be remembered is plant monsters, but the setting of plant monsters in Sword God domain is very similar to traditional online games. I see. Let's go, that task is not far ahead. About 10 minutes later, the two of them arrived at a dilapidated campsite. There are only a few tents in this campsite, and there are one hole after another on the tent. Through the hole, you can see the structure of the tent and the spider webs scattered inside. They walked into the largest tent, where there was a table with a dagger inserted. There is a skull lying next to the table. After entering, I saw a map on the table. Fukuoka Ming didn't care about the map and walked directly to the skeleton, throwing a Kyle onto it. When Kyle landed on the skeleton, a puff of smoke emanated from its mouth, forming a humanoid figure in front of Tomoka Akira. The figure gradually solidified into a middle-aged man with tired eyes, a scruffy beard, and a scar on his face. However, it is somewhat inaccurate to say that his lower body is illusory. Ghost. Ghost. Ah ah. Yasina let out a scream, quickly. Quickly eliminate him. Mingxi. Then she quickly ran behind Fugang Mingxi. Fukuoka Mingxi turned around slightly, lightly patted her head, and said gently, all right, don't be afraid, it's just a mission NPC. Oh, I don't care, don't let me see him anyway. Athena buried her face in her hand and said in a dull voice. Looking at Yasina, who was so scared that she wanted to hide, Fukuoka Mingxi chuckled and quietly used the system's photo function to record Yasina's appearance. Then he comforted her and said, then you can recite it and I'll take on the task. Yasina obediently turned her head around. Seeing Yasina turn her head, Fukuoka Mingxi secretly smiled again and then began to communicate with the NPC. The NPC, who looked like a destitute middle-aged man, spoke up and said, are you one of those traitors? His voice was so hoarse that it was hard to hear. No, I'm not what you call a traitor, Fukuoka Akira continued. That's the speculator who, like me, is searching for the treasure left by the 9 kingdoms before the earth was cut off. The NPC said, the goal is the same as mine and that group of traitors, huh? After laughing twice, his voice became hoarse and his volume decreased, making people wonder if he was going to disappear. You can understand it that way. The NPC showed a humanized teasing expression and said, give up. Even if you find the treasure, you won't be able to open it. Why? Because, like the traitors, you don't have a key. Huh, the NPC said crazily. Fukuoka Mingxi frowned and looked at the seemingly mentally abnormal NPC, asking, where's the key? The key. Of course the key is with me. Those traitors want to monopolize the treasure, but they don't know they need the key to open it. And once you enter the treasure trove, you can't come out without the key, the NPC laughed wildly. Huh, not only can't people come out, but even the soul has to stay there. We can only wait in loneliness for the treasure trove to open again. However, that's not enough. Traitors must die. I don't need them to live or die, I want them to go with me. I'll give you the key, you go kill them, and the treasure belongs to you. Enjoy the treasure alone. How about that? Do you agree? Said the NPC finally. Fukuoka Akira took on the task, and then the NPC took out a key covered in copper green and handed it to him. After giving the key, the crazy expression on the NPC's face finally faded and turned to relief. He said, "Then please." Then it slowly dissipated. After putting away the key, Akira Fukuoka turned around and walked towards Asuna, who was facing away from him. As he approached, he lowered his voice and made a strange sound. I died so miserably. Upon hearing this sound, Asuna, who was in a daze, suddenly felt a chill rush towards her forehead. She screamed and closed her eyes, swinging a punch towards the back. Don't come over. Fukuoka Akira, who didn't react, was punched in the face and flew backwards. After a while, on the way to the mission location, Fukuoka Ming kept rubbing his face. Although there was no pain sensation set in SAO, there was still a basic feeling. He looked timidly at the girl walking ahead, with a gloomy expression on his face. As if noticing his gaze, the girl turned her head slightly to look at him, with a creepy and gloomy smile on her face, and said to him word by word. "Fukuoka Ming, if you dare to scare me again in the future, you will die." Did you hear that? Fukuoka Ming nodded frantically, watching the girl's expression ease, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. An hour later, the two of them arrived at a forest about 1 kilometer away from Turbana and found their mission destination, a cave obscured by heavy shrubs. After carefully entering the cave, I saw a huge stone door at the deepest point. Pushing open the stone door, there is an empty hall, where about 10 skeletons lie in a row, and there is a stone tablet in the center of the skeletons. As the two walked into the hall, the hollow eyes of the skeletons lit up with a red light, and then their heads twisted towards them in an abnormal posture. The two of them took out their weapons and looked at the skull with caution. The skeletons surrounded them with weapons. The names on top of the skull are all the cursed betrayer. Fukuoka Ming stared at the red font name and whispered, "Are you cursed traitors?" He said to Yasina, "Then go up and deal with them." The two fought against the skeleton. The attributes of these skeletons are not high, and the combat AI is not very clever. The two of them worked together very easily to eliminate them. Is it over? Yasina took a breath and asked Fukuoka Ming. He frowned and clenched his weapon. "It's probably not that simple. These skeletons didn't produce any death effects after being defeated by us, but instead turned into shattered bones." Before Fukuoka Ming could finish speaking, those scattered bones suddenly flew up and gathered in the air, eventually transforming into a huge skeleton over 3 meters high. It held a huge sword adorned with ferocious bone spurs, and 3 HP values were displayed beside him. The name changed to the last grievance of the betrayer. The last grievance of the betrayer. Feeling the oppressive feeling emanating from the towering sword that was even higher than a human, Fukuoka Ming cursed in his heart. It's better to defeat the skull during the sealed test, even if there are changes, they shouldn't be so big. He took a deep breath and said to Yasina, "Be careful, this is a bit different from my intelligence." The betrayer smashed the front end of the giant sword to the ground, then dragged the sword towards the two, leaving deep scratches on the ground. Rushing to the front and back of Fukuoka Ming, the traitor's right hand advanced with a giant sword, and he slashed diagonally from the bottom. He immediately sprinted and dodged, lifting the sun will blade. Water breath 1 type. Water slash. The blade with flowing water fiercely slashed at the betrayer's leg bone, then he turned around and stepped on the betrayer's body, jumping high and posing in the air. The blade of the water breath octagonal type pot slashes the betrayer's neck bone from top to bottom, triggering a critical attack that significantly reduces their HP. When Akira Fujioka landed, the betrayer had already wielded a giant sword that illuminated his sword skills and quickly attacked him. His pupils shrank slightly, and he quickly raised his sword to defend the breath of water. The wave of strike. The sun will blade and the giant sword collided, and as the giant sword was shaken open, Fukuoka Ming's figure flew backwards. In the air, he shouted, "Switch!" Asina, who was already prepared on the side, activated her sword technique, and the thin sword and its owner quickly advanced, piercing the betrayer's body. With one successful strike, Yasina immediately began a series of attacks, with her thin sword hitting the betrayer one after another, causing her HP to continuously decrease. At this moment, the betrayer also recovered from his stiffness and swung his giant sword towards Asina. Fukuoka Ming quickly switched on and whispered, "Water Breath 7 type Ripple Spike." The sun will blade pointed at the giant sword, causing it to open slightly. Breath of Water Land type Twisting Vortex. The swirling water hit the betrayer, causing its HP to drop to the last one. Seeing that the betrayer didn't make any special moves, Fukuoka Akira breathed a sigh of relief and then cooperated with Yasina to gradually reduce the betrayer's HP. Just as the betrayer's HP was left with only the last trace, it suddenly let out a roar, and the sound waves vibrated, causing Fukuoka Ming and Yasina to enter a state of paralysis on the spot. The betrayer's giant sword flickered with a dangerous red light, and then the sword lifted and slashed fiercely at Yasina. Yasina's face turned pale, and Fukuoka Ming's eyes were about to crack. "No. No." He looked despairingly in Athena's direction. The giant sword was getting closer and closer to Yasina, with tears in her eyes. She said something to Fukuoka Ming, but his mind was blank and he didn't hear Yasina's words at all. At this moment, a system panel suddenly appeared in front of him, which read, "The Water Breath Type 11 has been learned." He didn't hesitate and immediately used his swordsmanship. In a daze, he felt time slow down and his senses became very sensitive. He could hear the sound of his heart beating clearly. Although it was in the game, Akira Fukuoka felt the rhythm of his blood. The breathing of water is like the shape of 11. It flows through the air and slashes. His figure instantly disappeared and appeared in front of Yasina, blocking her giant sword. His blade was flowing with azure water color, and his momentum did not diminish, chopping on the huge bone of the betrayer. When Yasina realized it, all she could see was the betrayer's transformed light, as well as the young man who maintained his sword swinging motion, with water flowing around his blade. Chapter 10. Current Situation of SAO. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the beginning of SAO, nearly 10,000 players were roughly divided into 4 different groups. The first one is to choose to stay in the starting town and survive with the initial gift of Kuer, which accounts for about half of all players. They don't believe what Mao Changjingyan said, but they dare not go to the wilderness to upgrade, so they hide in the hotel in the starting town and wait for external rescue. The second group accounts for 30%, and they choose to help each other and actively seek survival. The leader is the manager of the largest online game intelligence website in Neon. They were divided into different teams and assigned tasks according to the team, such as the hunting team, the intelligence team, and so on. The leader's team occupied the Black Iron Palace opposite the starting town square, where they hoarded supplies and gave orders to their subordinates. I made a mistake here. The army was established after the 25th level strategy was completed, but I'm too lazy to make any changes. Hey, at first, they didn't have any special titles, until later when they unified their clothing, many players jokingly referred to it as army, and they didn't refute it. The third group consists of about 1,000 people, who initially wielded a lot of hackle, but did not want to fight monsters to obtain supplies, and soon fell into a predicament. Because there are still two physiological desires, sleep and appetite, in the realm of Sword God, spending on these two aspects is necessary. I want to sleep because my brain cannot distinguish whether information comes from games or reality, so when I want to sleep, I have to go to a hotel in the town or spend a lot of money to buy my own house. The amount of money needed is extremely terrifying. An appetite is surprising. It is obvious that no matter how much food is eaten in the game, food cannot appear in the real body. However, eating food in the game can indeed eliminate hunger, which is mostly based on research using brain technology. Although fasting in the game won't lead to death, if you don't eat food all the time, the piercing hunger can drive a person crazy, so players will still obediently stuff virtual food into their mouths when they are hungry. But there is another question that makes people reluctant to think about it, which is that although game characters do not need to excrete, what about the real body? Returning to the main topic, most of the players who squander Kyle will eventually join the army, because they can sleep alone and find a place to lie down, but without food, it is not enough. The army will distribute food uniformly, so those who cannot survive will join them. Apart from joining the army, there are also some players who have not even considered joining any team, and they directly start as bandits in the slums of the starting town. Due to the setting of a safe zone in the town, no player can harm other players, so these people will ambush in the wilderness to attack other players and earn far more money than killing monsters. Although it's something that only thieves do, they don't know how to kill. At least not at first. The fourth group, big and small guilds, also aim for strategy games with around 500 members, divided into about 50 different guilds. Among the remaining approximately 500 people, there are 200 to 300 life professions and merchant players. Although the number is not large, they will also form guilds to earn the necessary kells for life. And the remaining over 100 players, who are also part of the Tongren group, known as solo players. They do not belong to any group and rely solely on themselves to obtain supplies and upgrade. This is an egoistic group with the most effective means of survival. They are almost all beta testers, using the information they have to sprint at the beginning of the game and quickly improve their level in a short period of time. To put it bluntly, having the power to independently fight monsters doesn't have many benefits when fighting with other players. After all, there are no magic skills in SAO, and the rare magic elements are only transfer gates between layers and several special crystals. So as long as one is proficient in technology, one can also deal with several monsters, and enjoying experience alone is naturally faster than leveling up with teammates. But the disadvantage of solo players is also reflected in having to rely on themselves. Once a solo player encounters an unexpected situation, such as being paralyzed and hitting a debuff, they are likely to die. However, if they have teammates, their safety can be greatly improved, as they can replenish health and clear debuff for you. So in the early stages of the game, the mortality rate of solo players is the highest among all players. But high risk also means high returns, and their level is also the highest. Another issue is that experienced and rapidly upgrading solo players have had huge conflicts with other players, which is inevitable. In the Black Iron Palace occupied by the army, there was originally a resurrection room during the testing period, but now a huge metal monument has appeared in that room, engraved with the names of all players, and the names of the deceased players will be marked with a horizontal line, and the time and cause of death will be recorded next to it. Except for the 213 players who died unknowingly at the beginning, the first player whose name was marked with a horizontal line did not die from a monster, but committed suicide within the first 3 hours of the game. This player believes that in terms of the construction of any vGear, as long as the connection with the game system is cut off, consciousness can be restored. So he arrived at the southernmost point of the starting town, at the edge of the fence in Ain Grande, jumped off this floating city with a leap. In Ain Glantry, there is no trace of land visible from below, only an endless sky and white clouds. 2 minutes after the player jumped down, a horizontal line appeared on his name and the cause of death was falling from a height. For 2 full minutes, it's hard to imagine what he went through. Equally unimaginable is whether he has returned to the real world. However, almost all players believe that it cannot be so simple to go back, because if it were really so simple, people outside would have already taken vGear. But there are still people who place their hopes on this. After all, death in the sword god domain is too illusory. It is impossible for a person to turn into a light and dissipate after death in reality. What comes to mind is not death, but game over in games, because it lacks realism. Although SAO is a game, the real monsters filled with the painstaking efforts of game designers still make many players fearful, unable to even hold their weapons and forget to run away, let alone use sword techniques to eliminate monsters. Even some beta testers would do this. In this way, nearly a month has passed and the number of dead players has reached a terrifying 2,000. But such a massive death has not even broken through the first layer. Continuing with this mortality strategy, not to mention 100 layers, all players will die before the 10th layer. However, there has not always been good news. A piece of news has been fed into the mouths of a group of players like a quick-acting heart-saving pill. On December 2, 2022, the first floor boss room was finally discovered.